Now let's sculpt a zombie face. Right here I have SculptGL opened in my browser. And this is just a great free utility that's all online, all in browser. And it's very similar to ZBrush, but a lot easier to hop into and definitely way less expensive than ZBrush, which is nice. So we're gonna use the face mesh OBJ to start. So I'll clear this scene and then import this OBJ. Now I got our face in here. And one thing to keep in mind is it looks like the scene is quite large relative to this tiny model, which I already accidentally painted on. So I'm going to clear this again. And in Files, under Scale and Center, I'm going to check that on and then add this again. Now this is a lot more manageable. All these values will probably work better because the face is kind of properly scaled to the scene. And to navigate in this scene, you can left click out in this open area to rotate, middle mouse to pan, and the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And now before I start sculpting on here, I'm going to increase the resolution of this mesh. If we go to rendering and turn on wireframe, you can see the mesh there. It's pretty low res, which is default for Spark. Now if we go under Topology over here and subdivide this a couple times, maybe 4 subdivisions, so we get a lot of little points to work with. So that way when we sculpt, we get this nice smooth surface. And the nice thing about working in this way is that there's a slider right here, this blue bar. So if we turn it all the way down, the underlying mesh is still intact, but you can see the sculpted areas still get pushed around. So that way we can bake the normals of this high-res mesh onto the low-res mesh. So this is how it will work. Now I'll undo until I get these bumps back off. And the shortcut key for wireframe is just W, so you can toggle that easily. And then when you start sculpting, make sure symmetry is turned on. That way when you make something on one side, it'll obviously take place on the other. And for the tool, I'll be using brush for a lot of it. To scale the radius and change the intensity, you can press X and C. So you just hold those keys down and move your mouse. You don't even have to click your mouse, you can just move it left and right. So with all that set up, I'm just going to start sculpting. Now for starters, I'm probably going to add some definition to the eyebrows and then some extra height around the cheek area. And then we'll be cutting in around the nose area. And I'm not a super advanced sculptor, so my results might not be super pro, but at least you can see the whole process. And by holding Shift, you can switch to the smooth mode. And as long as you have that held, it'll stay in smooth, and when you release, you'll go back to your other tool. And when sculpting, holding Alt will go the inverse. So I'm holding Alt to cut in, and then releasing Alt to paint back on. Like I said, I'm not a pro sculptor, but I think this is a pretty fun place to get started with. So with this sculpting complete, I'll go to Files, and then Save OBJ. And I'll rename this one with a suffix of high. And then if we go to Topology, and first I might want to double check and make sure that exported properly. So the mesh looks pretty good. So under Topology, on this resolution slider, if we dial this all the way back, this is the base mesh. If we hit W, we can see that topology there. And it doesn't look like much in this state, but when we turn this resolution slider back up, all that detail comes back. So we also need to export this because this is what we'll use in Spark. So under Files, Save OBJ, we'll do this again and call this one low. And just to double check, we'll double click on this and get a little preview. And it looks like there's no normals on it, so it's all faceted, but that looks correct. So up next, we'll bring this into Substance Painter.